Well, great. I hope everyone had a great break. And I'm really excited to kick off the next panel. As I mentioned, this next panel is entitled State Commissioners' Views on Load Growth. Please give a warm welcome to Tony Clark, Tricia Pridemore, and Hwikwon. Now let me introduce our moderator today will be Tony Clark. Tony is the Executive Director-elect of NARUC, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. And Tony is a former FERC commissioner, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioner. He is a former North Dakota Public Service Commissioner, and Tony is a former elected member of the North Dakota House of Representatives. So, Tony, you will moderate, and please take it away. And I'll come back in about 45 minutes.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you for that introduction. As Mark said, my name's Tony Clark. I'm the Executive Director-elect of NARUC, and I'll take over the tiller officially on January 1. It's a pleasure for me to be here. For me, it's a little bit of a homecoming, being that NARUC was my home for a long time. I spent 4.5 years as a federal official, but really I've always felt of myself as more of a state guy. I spent over 20 years in state capacities in one way or another. So NARUC's a great fit. NARUC, as many of you know, is the association that represents America's state utility commissioners. I like to tell folks that my vision for NARUC is that it be the one indispensable resource that every state utility commissioner around the country says, I couldn't do my day job without what NARUC is doing in Washington, D.C. And it deals with education and training and research and advocacy. NARUC, as many of you know, has a very robust international program with which we work with USEA quite a bit and has been a great partnership for many years. From a stakeholder perspective, I hope NARUC is an indispensable resource for you as well, and that it's the one place where the regulatory community comes together at least 3 times a year and ad hoc through different forums throughout the year to be that one place where you can connect with the state regulators and the regulatory community in general, which of course plays such a big role in the very issues that you all are talking about today. I'm so pleased that we have with us Commissioner Tricia Pridemore from the state of Georgia, who is also going to be the incoming president of NARUC next year, and Commissioner Hwikwon from the state of Minnesota, my neighboring state. I grew up about 4 blocks from Minnesota in Fargo, just on the other side of the river, so a state that I know well as well. I'm going to jump right into the questions. First one for Commissioner Pridemore, and then Commissioner Hom, a little bit more state specific. So Commissioner Pridemore, data centers are accounting for a large amount of growth in Georgia, and that is on top of a lot of economic development and growth that you've seen over a number of years. How is the Commission approaching this challenge of meeting that amount of demand load growth that you're seeing across the Southeast, really, but in Georgia especially?
Thank you, Tony. Thank you to USEA for this opportunity to be with you all today, and to Mark, and I look forward to my year as NARUC president and continuing to work with USEA. Also look forward to working with Tony. He's going to do an outstanding job. So the state of Georgia is uniquely positioned to take advantage of what I believe to be this once-in-a-generation opportunity where we're seeing electricity load growth. We are uniquely positioned to do so because we have a very, in my opinion, forward-thinking, robust approach to economic development and to ensure that we can do hard things. I say that with the knowledge and responsibility of the last 11 years of the Plant Vogtle project and the nation's first new nuclear units to come online in 30 years. But just this April, the Commission made a landmark decision for us to authorize Georgia Power to build 7,100 megawatts of new capacity. This is outside of the typical 3-year integrated resource planning cycle and rate case cycle that we do with Georgia Power. To give you all a little bit of a background on Georgia, we have one vertically integrated investor-owned utility in Georgia Power. They're a part of the Southern Company. We have 41 EMCs and 47 municipal electricity providers, all working within one combined operations and transmission system that has worked incredibly well for us and will, I believe, for generations to come. It allows us to have flexibility to take the needs of the state, work with our economic development partners, work with our governor's office to be able to produce really interesting, good things for our state. And that's where we see this data center work coming into play for us. So the 7,100 megawatts that we approved back in April, it is a combination of solar plus battery, 1,000 megawatts of that is battery storage, and some new gas CTs. And it was because we had these hyperscaler data center folks come to us and say, we want to be able to land in your state. We know that this is an opportunity for us. And our state and myself as an elected commissioner really believes in that. I believe that it's imperative for our nation to be on the forefront of this and not subject ourselves to sending data centers someplace else besides our own country. It's our own intellectual property. We need to own and manage it. So we embarked upon a process that not only approved the generation, but also put downward pressure on rates of about $2 a month for an average residential customer. And we did that by putting the hyperscalers under contract at the onset and getting them to commit to our state and commit to this growth and commit to their projects. We also got them to agree to pay for the generation and transmission in the project as well. And I think as we talk through this subject more over the next 45 minutes, we're going to find that these data center companies, these tech companies, they're willing to pay. They just need able and willing states and utilities to be able to partner with them.
Thank you. Turning to you, Commissioner Hom, Minnesota is seeing some of the same types of pressures. I understand that Microsoft is entered an agreement to have a data center near Becker, which, if my Minnesota geography is correct, is just up the road from a nuclear plant and just down the road from the Sherco complex, which is undergoing its own transition. So Xcel Energy, large utility in Minnesota, seeing demand increase in growth from that. How is the Minnesota Commission addressing issues of meeting that demand while trying to keep affordability and reliability on the front burner for customers?
Thank you, Tony. And before I start to talk about the issue, I have to have some disclaimer. I'm here not representing Commission, and my position here is not going to influence any outcome at the Minnesota Commission. I'm here to represent my own and my personal view. So being said, yeah, I think that's every state's issue these days, and I think we have that challenge. So for the little bit of the background for the state, we are different from Georgia. We are an appointed commissioner state. We have 5 commissioners appointed by governor, and we have a 6-year term for individual, and we are staging term, so we are changing commission every year. Being said, we are highly planned state. That means we are doing integrated resource plan. We have integrated distribution planning, and also we do the transmission planning, biannual transmission planning. So we were anticipating, based on the statute and other government policy, we are expecting a lot of growth in electrification and decarbonizations. This is an additional shock to the system that data center is not the big player until a few years ago. And Iowa, North Dakota, and Wisconsin were getting a lot of attention from these data center owners. But lately we are getting this interest, and we already approved the one case for the Meta, for the Xcel. And then we are seeing the Google, Microsoft, and big data center is looking at the Minnesota as one of the possible place. So first of all, our ILP process is robust, but also we had some concern that whether we can make a decision on the resource as fast as these data center owners want. So next Tuesday, Minnesota Commission is going to have a first commission non-agenda planning meeting inviting data center owners and stakeholders, including public advocates, consumer advocates, and environmental group, and all group get together to discuss this one. So first step is educating ourselves, because we have to know what's the problem in our hand. And then we can discuss what is a potential solution to make sure that we are protecting other ratepayers while we are accommodating this new load. I think at this point, that's a big picture of the commission plan.
Thank you. So just following up on something that I sort of embedded in each of your comments, while there's some similarities between Georgia and Minnesota, you both have kind of integrated resource planning or planning type processes. There is one difference in that the state of Minnesota and your largest utilities are in an RTO, MISO. I can't remember if there's any SPP and maybe just a little bit in Minnesota, but primarily MISO. Georgia is outside of an organized market. Starting with Commissioner Hom, can you talk about that, sort of how the interface works between the state commission, which has sort of overall authority over planning, but obviously is influenced by and interacts with a much larger regional organization, which has an impact on capacity and resource adequacy?
Yeah, thank you. RTO is, I think, a critical component of the meeting this challenge. I think as a single state, if we pursue certain energy policy, we may have to pay more, because the renewable energy generation cannot replace traditional generation one-to-one. That means we have to overbuild in terms of megawatt basis more wind and more solar. That means at times we have to have excess energy. Either we have to curtail that or we have to export it. So to do that, we need this RTO market. So RTO is an essential part of it. And plus, I think also RTO transmission planning plays the critical role in Minnesota because of that reason, plus reliability. I think reliability is in the economic sense public goods, like a national defense. We cannot procure individually those reliability, and then we can have a group reliability unless we have a good guidance. RTO is playing critical role there to making sure that we have a group reliability. Meantime, we are minimizing overall cost. So we have a good working relationship with the MISO and SPP, Southwest Power Pool, and we are proactively engaging in that system to make sure that we have a fair market rule. Meantime, we are developing transmission line system.
Great. And from a Georgia perspective, obviously a little different situation down there. You have utilities that effectively operate an integrated system over a number of states, but not within the RTO context. How does that work in the state of Georgia?
I'll say to that point, it does make us a little bit louder for starters. A little bit more nimble than what we see some other states. It allows us to perhaps speed to market a little quicker. I also think that it also gives us maybe some more flexibility when it comes to putting a premium on having a diversified generation portfolio. So in Georgia, we're hydro, nuclear, gas, we still have some legacy coal, and we're number 4, or will be once it's all developed, number 4 in the nation for solar. And so we put a premium on that diversity so we can have base load while still expanding out our usage of renewables and providing for a cleaner system. But it is the way we're constructed that gives us that flexibility and allows us to maybe operate a little quicker.
Very good. And so I sort of fully realize that we've got, generally speaking, there's kind of 3 types of states, either a fully structured state in an RTO, fully structured state in a bilateral market outside of an RTO, and then a restructured state inside an RTO. We don't have a rep on this panel, so I'll take the moderator's prerogative and say, Tony, you were at FERC. How do you think that impacts those states that are fully, and I came from a regulated state, but I oversaw RTOs for a few years. I mean, I think the answer is, and I think Todd Schnitzler may be coming up here later for a panel. There's Todd over. So, and he's a former Ohio regulator, but I think for those states that are restructured and in the markets, the functioning of the market itself becomes that much more important because they rely so much on the RTO operator to make sure that that capacity needs are met. And it's a very different relationship in that case. It's probably more dependent on things that are going on at FERC. And I know from folks that I talk to in those regions of the country, clearly the things that are happening with regard to RTO regulation, market price formation, and things like that become all that much more critical. But obviously something that for those folks who have communication with those states is something that they'll want to keep track of. All right, we've talked some about the large tech companies that are investing a lot in fulfilling the need for these data centers. They're very different load than many others in that they seek to come online very quickly, and it's huge demand all at once, which has some characteristics that are different than the more sort of organic, slow load growth that we've seen for many decades in the industry. With that, there has been some discussion of varying flavors of behind-the-meter or on-site generation solutions, and I know that tech companies are all thinking about ways that they may be able to self-supply some or all of their own power. It's taken on, as I said, a different flavor in different parts of the country. What role do you both see regulators playing in looking at those issues of behind-the-meter and on-site generation as we seek to meet the needs of an industry that I think most folks say, we want it here, we want it domestically. There's lots of reasons to have it done domestically, and there's some impetus for need of speed to market, but that challenge the regulatory system in a way that we haven't seen for at least several decades.
Most certainly. Tony, to that point, it's so I come from a tech background in another life, and I operated a piece of my software company at a data center, which we used to call back then an ASP, an application service provider system. Now it's called the cloud. Tech world always makes everything fancier and neater over time. Back then, it just had a lame acronym of an ASP. And the ASP relied upon, and my software relied upon, two primary things: the speed and processing of the server and the ability to cool that system. Because you can imagine how hot data centers can get. So it's an HVAC need where a lot of that electricity demand comes from. I think over time we're going to see, and we're already starting to hear, where the speed and processing and efficiency of the servers are getting faster and faster, and they're also getting more energy efficient. So the challenge that we looked at in Georgia was, how do we set ourselves on a path to build out generation and transmission to serve this load, while at the same time not overbuilding? Because what we don't want to see over time is those servers get so energy efficient that then we've built out additional transmission that's not necessary. So a big part of that was partnering with the tech companies and getting the tech company in the room with the utility and the commission and all of the stakeholders, and having everybody put their cards on the table and be honest and say, this is where we see that this growth is going to come from, and also this is where we see where we're not going to necessarily need this much generation tomorrow. I think a lot of the opinions that are out there on the demand, they're valid, but they're huge. And so I think that our ability to maybe be a little less conservative than what utilities are used to being and commissions are used to being, and maybe a little more conservative than what tech companies are used to being, and try to meet in the middle so that you can grow out over time. We don't always have to just pop up 7,000 megawatts overnight. It's nice when you can, but you can't do that every 6 months. You certainly can't build it every 6 months.
Commissioner Hahn?
Thank you. So, as a vertically integrated utility state, I don't see that as a significant issue for the Minnesota, and then also for those states who's a vertically integrated state. To me, I think it's more a problem with the state under the retail choice or restructured, because commission no longer control the generation ownership. Generation is totally outside the regulatory realm of the state. So it is more the federal side of the regulation part of it. Being said, to me, I think we have to simplify this issue rather than panicking out of this, because there are two main issues. One is the reliability issue, and the other one is economic issue, whether they are bearing the cost in a fair manner. I think there are a challenge at the FERC at this time on the certain proposal, and then their concern is heavily toward fairness of the cost allocation of the transmission line system. Meantime, also we have to worry about generation capacity reliability and grid system reliability. So as a state commission, we can focus on to making sure that our utility is coordinating, communicating with the commission, and then RTO to make sure that we are not creating this reliability problem. I think that has to be the first issue. And then second, we can tackle this cost allocation issue. If they are doing it distribution level, yes, commission has a control over. But if they are connecting at the transmission level, they have to go to the FERC. So I think once again, we need to have a good coordination and communication and education on this issue to make sure that which regulatory body has authority over this, and we need to make that issue clear so we can handle at the right regulatory body.
Great. So following up on this issue of visibility into what exactly is the load growth going to be, because I've had similar conversations with, when I was doing private consulting companies who would say, my gosh, we've got requests that's more than double our current installed capacity, and you talk to the neighboring utility and they've got the same thing. And then you would go to conferences like these and they'd say, well, some of that might be kind of double counting, right? It's a developer looking at different utilities, and so it's all going into the pie. Do you have a sense that you have, from your current seat, good visibility into exactly what those numbers are in terms of the demand growth for your utilities that you oversee, or is there still more work to be done to really ferret out what the right number is, understanding that that is going to change over time?
Do you want to go first? You go
Yes.
first.
Yeah. To me, that is the why RTO's function is very critical. As a state, yes, it does matter because of the economic development issue. However, in the RTO perspective, so reliability as a public goods, RTO is managing that RTO level reliability. Doesn't matter whether it's in Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin. As long as it shows up and RTO has the ability to manage it, I don't see there is any issue. So it is more in terms of the reliability, I don't see a huge problem right there as long as we can deliver the generation capacity. That's a different issue because we have a lot of interconnection issue, transmission line issue. Once again, we are lucky. MISO is proactively building transmission line and proactively handling interconnection issue compared to other RTO. So we have ability to deliver. But also in the short run, I think we can deliver the capacity through demand side resource. Not as a long-term solution possibly, but at least for the short term, we can deliver those capacity there. Being said, if our utility comes to the commission and asking, oh, we need to build 2,000 additional megawatt because the phantom data center will show up, that's a very different issue. So that case, we have to have a process to evaluate that possibility. However, it's so far, I think, as you said, data center doesn't allow utility to talk to us, even to regulators, until they sign the deal. So that can become issue at the state level. So this is a sort of recommendation to data center, potential data center owners. We don't have to serve the load if you do not have a capacity. So if we want to have a capacity to build, we need the communication and education. Come to the regulator and let us know. That way we can make the decision in time, and then we can make an informed decision so we do not harm the rest of the customer. Meantime, we can accommodate this new load.
To the commissioner's point, so if you have in your regulator toolkit varying tools that you can use. And one of them that we have in Georgia is DERS. And so it allows the flexibility for the customer to use at on-site generation through a program that they then get their individual bill. They're billed separately. It sits completely outside of the rest of the generation fleet. But to that point, when we're trying to build these larger than 1,000 megawatt projects, what we did in this docket, which I hope becomes the boilerplate for what we do over and over again with these, is we have a 90-day review period in each of them. So first, the customer's got to come under contract, so they've got financial skin in the game to be able to not only manage the generation and the transmission, but they also have reasonable expectations on build-out and schedule. Then, every 90 days, the commission, we get updated on how that construction's going. So we know how quickly that customer is coming online. And I'll tell you, one of the values of this that we felt at our commission was we got a lot of pressure from county governments, because you could imagine, data center's not a big job boost for a county or a city, but it certainly is tax revenue. And they were hearing of this out there, and they immediately came to us and started, pressuring us to just move forward. We had to make them understand our job is to protect the system that protects all of these existing customers. And so we believe that this 90-day schedule of monitoring the construction and knowing when these customers are coming online, that gives us as regulators insight as to how much of that generation and transmission they're going to be using over time. So then we can go back, and Georgia Power can go back and build and construct accordingly.
Great. So in both of your comments, I've heard DERS, DR, it sort of all falls under the bucket of kind of non-big capacity, non-transmission alternatives to meeting some of this growth. So let's talk about things like microgrids, energy storage, the DERS that you've talked about, distributed resources in generation. What regulatory structures are you both working on in your states on some of these kind of, not the big build, not the big wires build, but other sort of ways that we can help make the system better, and sometimes at lower cost?
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think Minnesota does ILP. So, and then also, not long ago, we add additional requirement that is a distribution level planning. So in that process, I think the utility has to provide their plan to do those demand side along with the supply side resource. Being said, I think now we are changing our paradigm in the energy supply and demand, because for long we were using base load as a baseline for our energy. Now we are going to have a very variable resource over time, and we have to have a different way to manage it. That's why demand side can help to manage it as a virtual power plant to settle those variability of the supply side matching with the demand side. So first thing that is, we have to think about changing our rate design. So like a time of use and critical peak pricing. So I think Minnesota has open dockets of this the advanced rate design. So that can be one tool to do it. And also, I think that's why this data center load can play a very positive role in addition to the scare. So we are scared with this load, but also it can play the critical role in the developing this demand side resource, because in the short run, we cannot provide any additional capacity at this point because of transmission line shortage, or I heard that combined cycle or CT even unit, even if state allowed to build those, takes about 3 years. So lead time of ordering those takes 3 years. And some state takes like 9-10 years go through the regulatory process to finish that regulatory process alone for the combined cycle unit. That means if data center wants to have this resolution within a couple of years, to me, demand side is only solution for the short run. unless we proactively overbuild. But that has a potential issue with the individual utility level because we cannot just overbuild as a field of dream because that has a direct impact to the ratepayers. So that's why, to me, this data center load growth can play very positive role in advancing demand side resource.
Excellent. Commissioner Pridemore?
So there are some things in my control as a regulator and some things that are out of my control. And one of the things that's certainly in my control are the long established rules by which that the utilities file with the commission, the process by which that they go through in a filing. And, you know, like Ham said, we have a very robust integrated resource planning process in Georgia. We prepare for it for a year, implement it over the course of a year, and then implement it over the course of a year. So you're constantly in this process of, we're always in an IRP cycle, just at a different point in time for it. But the one thing that we found was with the need for this additional generation, Georgia Power came in for an interim IRP, but then we also had these individual projects that, you know, folks were calling and talking to the commission about this need for demand. We didn't have a way to be able to authorize them to move forward with it. And so we came up with a DERS component to our IRP with some individual dockets that kind of align with that to give them the flexibility to go out and authorize a DERS construction so that that customer could choose Georgia. The one thing I never want to have happen is I never want my governor to call me and say, well, we were on the cusp of landing, you know, great job creator customer X, and you couldn't do it because your process was too slow, Tricia. So we had to address some of the processes that we have at the commission, which I'll tell you, the regulatory process can be incredibly laborious. And sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it's not. It's just the way that it's always been. And so if you look, I think, at your process and determine that there might be some efficiencies in there and some ways that you can instruct or point your utilities into one direction and then have them do the construction or the follow-up on the construction, it allows your utilities in your state to still be nimble.
Great, thank you. So let's turn to a couple of generation resources that get a lot of attention. First one being nuclear. Both of you have nuclear units in your state. Georgia has been at the forefront of a lot of nuclear issues. You're here in D.C. You've got a room full of folks who have an impact on the Hill. What would you like them to know from a state perspective, having gone through and done a lot of the heavy lifting on this next generation of nuclear? What can Washington, D.C. do to be helpful to you and your state roles in terms of this resource that a lot of folks look at and say is going to be a big part of the solution?
We need more nuclear. And the number one thing that I would tell policymakers in D.C. is do not let this workforce that worked on Plant Vogtle, do not let them retire without another one. Do not let them, Mark's laughing, but he's right. It's do not let them go. Part of the challenges with Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4 was that our nation had not constructed new nuclear in 30 years. You can imagine those people didn't work in the industry anymore. We had to go in and train from scratch, which, by the way, that was my job before I was a commissioner. I ran workforce development for the state of Georgia. And it was just such a challenge to get not only the skilled craftsmen there. At the height of Vogtle, we had 7,100 people on site building those units. It was the largest construction project in America at different points in time over that 11-year cycle. And a big part of those schedule delays was us having access to the right people to do this work, us having access to the nuclear engineers and the scientists that knew how to work with the design. And so I would just beg, do not let these people retire. We can't afford it again. We need them to go to work, whether that is on an SMR or an AP1000, but let's just put them to work. I would say the second thing to that, and I credit this as one of the primary reasons that Vogtle finished when so many others didn't, is that we made the process transparent. Now, to the outside world and outside of Georgia, to y'all, you just saw the pain because the pain was what was in the paper. But that transparent process is what allowed the commission, the legislature, the governor, the utilities, the public, everyone to have ownership and understanding of the project. It's really, in my opinion, that with labor, the two things that allowed us to be successful when so many others weren't. And so I would encourage transparency in the project. Your commission should have a regular docket once a year, 4 times a year, et cetera. Go through the construction monitoring process. Throw it all out there. It's absolutely, certainly aspects of it that you probably don't want people to see, a 6-month scheduled delay because you can't find welders. But it's that's so critical to getting people to understand just how serious and complex these projects are.
Thanks, Commissioner Hom. Minnesota's got a few. They're a lot older units. They've been around for a while, Monticello and PI. Lessons learned on nuclear in Minnesota.
Okay, first of all, I have to say that Minnesota has a prohibition on the new nuclear power plant. So we cannot issue certificate of need as a commission for the new nuclear power plant. It's
Is that
a
either
statute.
large scale or SMRs? I mean, none of it.
No, it's
Okay.
a statute. So our main focus is a life extension of the existing units and then how to manage the spent fuel storage. So as of now, we have 2 power plants with the 3 units. We are storing all those spent fuel on site. So we have last 10, 15 years, we had to deal with how to store those spent fuel. So that went through the commission process. And then there was a 1 life extension, and then potentially the next one is another life extension filing. So under that scope, I think the commission is working on that issue as a separate issue, but also as a part of ILP process. Being said, in general, I think this big major data center really wants to have these nuclear power plants because that's the easiest and best way to meet their sustainability goal with a stable electric energy supply. So that's why I think it's so popular all over the nation. Whoever has any excess capacity of this nuclear power plant is getting data center.
Yeah, is there discussion in the state of Minnesota at the legislature about that, the new nuclear ban, or has that not risen to the surface yet?
I think that debate goes on every session, but I'm trying to stay away from that discussion. So until they tell me what to do, I cannot engage in that discussion.
Yeah, got it. Another resource that gets a lot of attention, it sort of seems to go hand in hand with renewables. Renewables obviously is getting a lot of attention with the IRA, continue to see a lot of investment in that. Hand in hand with that has been a lot of investment in gas, which seems to enable a lot of the renewables, at least given current technologies, and it seems to have a pretty long bridge in terms of its importance. Gas electric reliability, it's something we've been talking about for a long time at the states, at FERC, in DC, continues to be important. I want to give you, Commissioner Pridemore, an opportunity to talk about what's going on with GEAR, which is NARUC's effort to bring together some of the critical issues in gas electric reliability. If you can give an update on that, it's your turn to plug it, because in my mind it's really important, and seeing what the effort that you all have been putting in has been inspiring.
So, Tony, I've got to say that you would have asked me this question a year ago, I would have given you a very different answer. But I'm obviously Southern, and when I go meet my maker, they usually say, like, she was a really nice lady and she had a lot of friends and she's a good cook. On my epitaph, they're going to say, she sure did talk about gas electric harmonization a lot. Oh, and she was a pretty good cook, too. But the thing with GEAR, I think, that has been working so well, and I give the credit to our current NARUC president, Julie Fedorchak from North Dakota, credit for this, is that this was the effort where we took state commissioners and every piece of the gas electric value chain is represented. So we've got gas producer, interstate pipeline, we've got an LDC, an EDC, we've got an RTO. Everybody is sitting around the same table working through these issues together. We're really seeing where there's viable solutions and where we can get consensus. We're not going to get consensus everywhere, but I know that from a state commission standpoint, it's getting us closer to solving some of the challenges. We've also identified some places where, quite candidly, they're not really challenges. They're challenges that I think other people think are real, but when you really talk to the people that do this work on a daily basis, it's not real. It's not true. And so we've had these really hard discussions. We're going to continue with GEAR's work. I'm excited to announce some things at our NARUC annual meeting coming up in Anaheim next month because...
Very good. So get your registrations in. I'm all about selling registrations now.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you.
But
Early bird rate no longer applies.
if you are involved in one of the organizations that put forward somebody that serves on GEAR, engage with them, talk with them. We're really making some headway on some key points, and we know that in certain sections of the country, certain regions of the country, this is absolutely critical. And so we're going to do a couple things actually before this winter season that we're excited about that I can't talk about just yet, but we're really close. But know that the need and the situation varies based upon state. It's based upon their market conditions, but in some pockets of the country, this is a huge challenge. And this has provided an opportunity for state commissioners to share best practices and ways that their individual states or that their regions have overcome these challenges as well. So.
Very good. Thank you. And Mark, I want to land this plane on time for you, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. But please join me in thanking both Commissioner Pridemore and Commissioner Hom for being here today.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, and really some very insightful comments. I know we could have easily gone on much longer, but thank you for that. It's going to be essential, of course, for the state commissioners. Really, you guys are really the point. I mean, it's up to you to really kind of help us solve these things. So thank you very much.